Hashem made a work out of him, which is why it's called Shem representing Hashem. So where are we up to? Okay, so I'm going to do that. Then I have to go back because I forgot to record this morning. The two dots on him, it's Gufa, right? Zok the Hela Gemara. Gufa, on the Heyman, which is today's life. Minayin she'enu chayiv ella al sheyesh ba yediyah petchila v'yediyah b'soif. The Helaman time. So this is the brisa that we learned on Dalet Amud Aleph on the bottom. But now the Gemara is drilling down. The reason why the Gemara brought this brisa down is because we were looking for an independent source that the Rebbe himself holds that you're chayiv sai if you forgot that you're tamei, and sai if you forgot that this is a Mocha Mikdash, right? That was the whole purpose of this. And we didn't just want it to be a liba de Rabbi Akiva, we wanted it to be Rebbe's own shita. And right before the two dots, the Gemara decided that it can't be Rebbe's own shita because Rebbe Darshan's. I'm sorry, the Gemara said this could be Rebbe's own shita. We found a source by Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshev where Rebbe himself said that you're chayav a korban oil of yard even though you forgot that this was a Malka Mikdash. Where we couldn't find an independent source for Rebbe was that you're chayav korban oil of yard for Shavuous Sheker L'Shavar, right? That's where we couldn't find an independent. So the Gemara had to say, so this was a brisa where we proved that Rebbe holds that even on Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshev. Okay. Gufa minayin she'ena chayiv ela al sheish ba yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'soif the hela bin time. If this is not a crisis, I'm in the middle of a class, so I can't speak to you. Is this a crisis? Yeah. Is this a crisis? Yes, it's a 3-ton heat pump, and I'll see you there at 11:30. Thank you. Okay, Zok to Gemara. Guva minayin she'enu chayiv ela al sheyesh ba yediyah b'tchila v'yediyah b'soif v'helen b'ntayim. Right, that's what you bring a korban of yard for. If remember, we have different korbanos. If you had yediyah b'tchila, not yediyah b'soif, or if you had yediyah b'soif and not yediyah b'tchila, those were different korbanos on Yom Kippur. Talmud Leimar v'nelam shnei pam. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, and we learned the psukim inside where it says v'nelam once, where you forgot that you're a tamei, and the second v'nelam says v'nelam, and then it says v'noidei love. So we learned that it was first v'nelam, and then it was noidei love. And from the two v'nelams, you learn that there was a yediyah, a halama, and a yediyah. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that was Rabbi Akiva's approach of how we do that. Rabbi Yomer, einay tzarich. I don't need the extra word v'nelam. From the one word v'nelam, I know that there had to be a yediyah before. Why? Because by definition, what does v'nelam mean? I forgot. If you forgot, you must have known it before. So it says v'nelam, meaning you knew before, then you forgot, and then it says in the pasuk later on v'hu yadav Hashem, which is finding out about the tuma afterwards. V'hu yada harekan shtei yediyos. So kum techais, with only one v'nelam, Rebbe was able to extract all the information that he needed, that Rabbi Akiva needed an extra word v'nelam to learn from, right? So now Rebbe is left with an extra v'nelam. Imkein matam v'nelam. So the second v'nelam is l'chayev al helam tuma v'al helam mikdash. Not only you chayev if you forgot that you're a tamei, you're also chayev if you forgot that you were in the Mocha Mikdash. Because from the actual lashon pasuk, it's mashma that you forgot that you were a tamei. But since there's an extra v'nelam, we learned that you're also chayev a korban if you forgot that you were in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, Amar Mar. So now the Gemara is going to drill down to understand what Rebbe is referring to. V'nelam means mechlal sheyada. That's Rebbe's assumption. His whole shot in the pasuk is based on that assumption. Well, my mashma, where do we get that assumption from? So the Gemara is probing: is this assumption a legitimate assumption? Amarava, yes, it is. It could have said he's tamei, and it is aluma from him. It's not known to him. That would indicate, that would connotate that he has no knowledge of it at all. But nelam is mashma that he forgot. Forgotten means that he must have known before. Amalei Abayev, I'll show you other psukim where you use v'nelam, and you can't possibly fartaich it that you knew and then you forgot. You You tell me the husband knew that she was mizana and they forgot? That doesn't make sense. You have a yada if he would have known, in fact, before that she was mizana, and Tosh says two pshatim, either if he would have known that she was mizana, or if maybe it's speaking where he forgot that she was nistra. That's what it's talking about. But iyada mi batkul amaya, the mind once he knows that she was mizana, the mind wouldn't be boidiker. But Tanya says v'nika ishmi avain, and only then va'isha hitisas avaina. Bizman sheisha menukam avain, a man boitkin asishtoi, eidish menukam avain, in a man boitkin asishtoi. So what's the problem?
You don't do it, or it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. But the question, if since it won't work, therefore you don't do it. So here, since he knew about it, he's not menukam avain. The question is, why isn't he menukam avain? Just because he knew about it, how does that make him? If he didn't do it, he wasn't mizana. Normally, it means if he had relations with her after he found out that there's trouble, it won't work. That's pashup shot of it. So here, he found out about it, but it didn't do the favor. So what's the Gemara talking about? So for that, we need Tosfos. So if we just slide over here at the Tosfos and we go up an inch, it says Avol Mikol Mokim Kasha. Amai Chashav Lei Ein Manuka. Why is this called Ein Manuka? Im Lei Bala Mishadistra. Just because he knew about it, that's called Ein Manuka. So look at Tosfos Vima Mon Fanayid. V'Yeshleimar, your wife slept around on you and you forgot. How is it possible you forgot? Your yourself must be a big porridge if it doesn't even bother you that you forgot about it. And therefore, you're going to say for such a subtle avera, just because you forgot, that's going to make it that you're called you're not menukam avain? Zok says absolutely. We learned in Saita that if someone's children aren't behaving appropriately and you don't admonish them, that will be enough of a reason why the Saita won't be boited. So if your attitude doesn't lend the gravity to a situation like this, that you're able to forget it, you're not going to be zoicha that the Saita will work for you. Interesting. So Zok to Gemara. So Vanilla must mean by Saita that he never knew about it. And I'll ask you another question. The Navi is discussing the Torah. The Navi says about the Torah, the Torah is so deep, it's coming from everybody. In other words, nobody could understand the depth of the Torah. Are you telling me that once upon a time somebody was and we forgot it? I'll prove to you that we never knew the depth of the Torah. Nobody ever was able to know the full extent of the depth of the Torah. So, your whole assumption that Vinela means you once knew does not make sense. El Amar Abaya, you know what Pshat in the Rebbe is? And he changed the whole Pshat. He mamish turns over the whole Pshat on and said, it's not Pshat that you knew you were tum and you forgot. No, it just means that you're exposed to this whole issue. Amar Abaya, Kasova Rebbe Yedias Beis Rabbi Shma Yedia. All it means is you learned in Cheder Hilchas Tumah V'Tahira. And that's all it means. You learned in Cheder Hilchas Tumah V'Tahira, and then not knowingly you walked into the Beis Hamikdash when you were tummy. So you're not even talking about forgetting and remembering. Vanilla means that you, according to Rebbe, that you had to have some exposure to Hilchas Tumah V'Tahira.
Didn't know the halacha, you didn't remember.
No, you knew the halacha too. You might have forgotten that you're tummy now. No, you might have forgotten that you're tummy. We're not even talking about forgetting the halacha. We're not referring to that. Until now, we assumed you remember something, you forgot something. We're wiping that out completely. It just means you had an exposure and you didn't know that you're tummy. So it's not you remembering and forgetting. How could it be that anybody wouldn't have yidiyah b'tchila? Everybody knows of the concept of Tumah Tahira. So how would that fit into the Lashon Mishnah? Zokt Gemara, what are you talking about? Frank Gemara, how can it be? Me, you could the Leslie Yediyah space rabbi, but you can tell me the guy, mommy doesn't know olive baits? Amayin, yes. Mishkachas la betinuk shenishpa levein hana. Now let's have a quick peek into. Yes,
I don't understand why the Gemara.
Before you ask, I just want to look at Tosfos first.
Okay, sorry.
So the whole shot that we were working with, that you remembered and you forgot, that gets wiped out. If you ask him today, did you remember learning a cheder about Tumah Tahira? He'll say yes. Never forgot that. The whole Venelam and the pasuk are just saying that a tinik shenishba doesn't bring a carbon oil period. Yoidea, he knows nitma asura. What nela me'enisha means that it was nela, meaning he has a idea of isurim of a rise that will create an isur to him. That's all it means. The gabetar nami. Yeah, you might not know all the depth of the Torah, but you know there's a Torah, you know the basics. So all it means is that you're not going to be a chayav or carbon for something that you have no clue about. So it totally changes the pshat. Okay, Akiva, sorry about that. Akiva, I'm ready. Unless you're
Yeah, no, I forgot already what I wanted to say. No, I know what the Gemara is surprised about. We learned in the Dorim, and I keep coming back to that, how people forget what they said, what they meant, what they did know, what they didn't know. I'm not sure it's such a huge stretch to say the guy forgot, maybe forgave, maybe he has other issues. It's not so far-fetched. When somebody forgives somebody else, he's also meant, that's what kapara means. Not
Yeah,
only
but
I
the problem
forgive you,
is,
I also
if someone
forget
is
about you.
usher for you, you can't forgive that. That's not yours to forgive. If a wife is usher to a husband because she was mazana, it's not in his ability to be able to forgive, because Baruch Hu said she's usher to him. You can't forgive if you owe somebody else $1 million. I can't forgive that. The guy who's owed $1 million has to forgive.
Um, but we do even in the Gemara that if he's bale, if he's mekane, and then he's bale baderech, then it doesn't work.
But that doesn't mean it's mutter. It's still also for him. That's the whole point. Since he was bala b'derech and he did a never, he's not menukim oven, and it won't work the mesoita. But he's not allowed to live with her. His forgiving doesn't accomplish anything. It just messes him up.
He takes back his kanos. That's what happens. It's only
But he
about his.
doesn't.
If he
But
was
she's still
never
also to him.
mekane,
But she's
what's
still
that?
also to him.
Not if he wasn't mekane. Not if there's no edim, right?
If he was mekana her,
If
and
he
then
was,
nistera, and then she was nistera, and then he was bala, he's not allowed to live with her.
he's not allowed. I hear.
Yeah, the halacha is even if she doesn't want to drink the mei amorim, so he divorces her and he doesn't have to give her ksuba.
Right. Okay.
Zok the more weiter. Yitzia Shabbos shtayim shehin arba. Tanan Hasan. We learned in the Mishnah in Shabbos a much more elaborate expression of this concept. Yitzia Shabbos shtayim shehin arba b'fnim, shtayim shehin arba b'chutz. Now, there's a lot of discussion. There's at least 3 pshatim brought down right over here as to what this means. But Rashi learns that shtayim shein arba b'fnim means you're talking about hachnosa. Shtayim l'chiv is hachnosa de ani v'hachnosa de balabayis. So fnim means we're bringing an object to Rishus HaYachid. Not everybody learns that way, but that's the pashas of Rashi over here. But the main kasha is ma'ishna hacha. The Tanish time Shein Dal the Sulai. Here we don't elaborate. We just mentioned time Shein Arba. Umash Nahazam in Shabbos, the Tanish time Shein Arba b'fnim, Ushtaim Shein Arba b'chutz, and it elaborates much more on the concept. So Dr. Gemara, the answer to that is simple. Hasam the Iker Shabbosu in Masechah Shabbos, where that's what we're focused on. Tani Avos v'Toldos. It talks about the Avos and the Toldos, and we'll have to see what are the Avos and what are the Toldos. But Hacha, where we're just mentioning it in passing, because it's similar to our case in Shavuos, the Lavikar Shabbosu, Avos Tani, Vitoldos, Loy Tani. So it makes sense that the Gemara would elaborate, the Mishnah would elaborate more in Masechah Shabbos. Fact Gemara, Avos Maininu, what are the Avos? The Gemara, Yitzios. Yitzios means if there's an object that's in Rishus HaYachid that's brought out to Rishus HaRabim. Now there's 2 ways for that to occur. Either the Balabais picks it up, standing inside, and puts his hand outside and places it down. That's one way of having Yitzhak. The other way of having Yitzhak is an Oni standing outside. He sticks his hand inside, picks up an object inside, and brings it to him. So those are only 2 ways of having those Yitzhaks. Not 4, but our mission is Shtaim Shein Arba. Yitzhak is tired to have you. So Oibazoi, how do you have 4? Maybe it's included cases where the one person did not make the Akira and the Anocha. So then there's another 2 cases where the Balabais made the Yitzia, but he may have only done the Akira, not the Anacha. So when he put his hand out, instead of putting the object down in the Rishus HaRabim, the Oni took it out of his hand and put it in, or vice versa when the Oni did the Yitzia. So maybe that's the case. But Dr. Gemara, we already said that you can't understand our Mishnah that way, because we already said, well, Dumya Demaris Nagaim Katani. Mahasam kulu lichiyuva, avacha kulu lichiyuva. Right? We already established that all four cases have to be cases that would trigger a carbon. Remember, we had a discussion if it was carbon, if it was malchus, but the Gemara ended up saying you have to say it's a carbon. Ella Omer Papa, I'll tell you what it is. Hasam the Iker Shabbos, Tani Chiyuve Upaturi. There where it's Iker Shabbos, it said the cases of Chiyuv and the cases of Tur. So it's Shtaim Shenaba B'fnim, Shtaim Shenaba B'chutz, which is actually a total of 8 cases. But Haga Chiyuve Tani Upatur Lai Tani. It only lists 4 cases that would lead to a Chiyuv. That would have to be 2 of Haitzah and 2 of Achnasa. So Zakt Gemara Chiyuve Maininu, Yitzios. Frank Gemara, Yitzios is still only Tarti. There's only 2 cases where you're taking something from the Rishus HaYochid into the Rishus HaRabim, that there would be a carbon. Zakt Gemara, Shtayim Doitza, Ushtayim Dachnasa. We're also referring to the 2 Chiyuvim if you brought something from the Rishus HaRabim into the Rishus HaYochid. Frank Gemara, but Yitzios Katani. The Lashon of our Mishnah is Yitzios Shabbos, Shtayim Shenarba. Yitzios means you're taking it out, not in. Zakt Gemara, Amar Rashi, not a big deal. Tana Hachnasa Nami Haitzah Karile. Our Tana refers to Achnasa as Haitzah. And the Gemara is going to say on my base because you're taking it out of the Rishus HaRabim into Rishus HaYochid. Mimai, where do you see that this is how the Tana considers Hachnasa also to be a Haitzah? And he refers to it with the description of Haitzah. Ditnan, right in Mesechus Shabbos. Hamoitzi Rishus L'Rishus Chayev. Rishus L'Rishus doesn't say from what it's much from any type of Rishus, whether it's Rishus HaYochid or Rishus HaRabim, to any type of Rishus, right? Mi lo yaskinan, wouldn't it also include the Kama Ayel Iyuli? You're taking something from Rishus HaRabim and bringing it into Rishus HaYochid. V'kakarila, it's under the heading of Hamoitzi Rishus L'Rishus. V'kakarila, it's all. Who said? V'dilma, maybe what it's referring to is Kamapik Rishus HaYochid L'Rishus HaRabim. Zok Gemara, you cannot say that because why did the Mishnah remain generic? It must be that moitzi includes even from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYochid. Period. So we've proven that the Tana refers to Hachnasa with the word Haitzah. But the question is, why Taka did Tana do that? Why is it linguistically acceptable to use the word Haitzah when you're really describing Achnasa? The time of my, the teretz is Tana kol akiras chevetz mimekoymai Haitzah karili. Whenever you're moving the chevetz away from where it is, it's called Haitzah. You're taking it out, right? You could take something out from the outside to bring it to the inside. So therefore, it's appropriate to use the word Haitzah. Amar Rabbeinu Masnisa Namidekum. If you look at the Mishnah in Shabbos, it actually is very meduyak that the Tana really considers Hachnasa as a form of Haitzah. Because the Tana first in Shabbos makes a generalization. And then the Tana now wants to explain, if you look up the Gemara Shabbos, the Tana explains all the different variations of what happened. You know what the first case that the Tana explains is? The Kamafarish Hachnasa. The first case that the Tana goes to explain is a case when the Oni is bringing something from the outside to the inside. So you see clearly that it's a lechatchiladik way to describe Achnasa using the heading of Yitzia, because that is the very first. Now, if it's a b'di'evadik Yitzia, you don't really consider it Yitzia, you're just stretching the meaning of the word, then he would have first explained the cases where it's really a Yitzia, and then at the end say this is also included. But since his first case to explain is the case of Achnasa as an example of what Yitzia is, that shows that it's an appropriate word. Shmami no. Rava has a whole different shot. Rava says, you asked me a kasha, why is it called Yitzios if it's including Achnasas? Rava holds Yitzios doesn't mean Yitzios. Yitzios means Rishuyos Katon. It just means there's 2 domains that things could be removed from. There's the domain of Rishus HaRabim and there's the domain of Rishus HaYochid. Rishuyos Katani, Rishuyos Shabbos Ishtayim. Gewaltig. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Masnisin Shabbos Dag. No, he doesn't speak it up here. He doesn't quote Rav. So he Tosfos quotes Rashi in Shabbos. So Pirish Bekunjus Beper Kama the Shabbos Yitzios Shabbos time Kleimar Shtei Rishuyos. There are 2 Rishuyos, Rishus HaRabim, Rishus HaYochid. While Yidayim, and through these two domains, you have a variety of cases. Yesh noch daled isurim b'fnim v'daled b'chutz. Okay, gewaltig. Zog to Gemara weiter. Marois Nagoy. Shtayim Shen Harba. Tananas, we learned in Besechas Nagoyim. Marois Nagoyim are Shnayim Shen Arba, and this is where we brought a rye from, that they're all class A Nagoyim that you bring a carbon for, right? But this was the whole rye that all the cases have to be that, right? You can't have Yeshman Leftur, right? It was from Nagoyim. So what are the four Maris? Baheres is the Ishkiya Bar B'Sarai. This is this week's parsha. Se'es oy sapachas oy baheres. So we already said sapachas is a tolda. So it's really the two types of Nagoyim are se'es and baheres. So baheres is the most bright white. It's azok keshalak. It's the brightest white like snow. Shniala, the toilda of baheres, something that's not quite as bright white, is kesid ha'hechel, is the whiteness of the sid ha'hechel. Se'es is the other daraisa dik in the nega. That's ketzemer loven, like white bleached beautiful wool. Shniala kakrumbeya. So it's very important to ask the following question: what is more white, se'es ketzemer loven, or the shnia to baheres, which is kesid ha'hechel? Baheres we know is the whitest of the white. That's azok v'shalom. The question is, if I had to label them 1, 2, 3, 4, Baheres would for sure be 1, and Krumbeya would for sure be 4. But what is 2 and 3? Is 2 Kashela, is 2 Kasida Hechel, and 3 is Katzemer Lavan? Or no, maybe it's 2 is Katzemer Lavan, and 3 is Kasida Hechel. How would you understand it? Bepashtas.
Yes, the first one.
The whitest of the white is for sure Baheres, which is Azuk Kashela.
Oh, it's not.
The
Fourth one.
The fourth one is Krum Beiter, that's for sure the least white. But between Se'es, which is Ketzemer Lovan, and the Shnia to Baheres, which is Kesida Hechel, which one would be whiter?
Probably what you just said, the wool.
This okay. So that is the case. So the case is the two whitest are the Baheres, which is Azok Keshelag, and then comes Se'es, which is Ketzemer Lovan. Those are the two whitest. That means the Sida Hechel, which is number 3, is not 1 removed from Baheres, it's 2 removed from Baheres, right? And in Krumbeya is not 1 removed from Se'es, it's 2 removed from Se'es. So Zok Gemara, Omer Chanina, Montana Maris, Nagoim Deloik Rabbi Kiva. It can't go according to Rabbi Kiva because Rabbi Kiva holds that if it's 2 removed, it doesn't count at all. The Rabbi Kiva, Kiva Domer Zu Lamaila Mizu, Zu Lamaila Mizu, since Rabbi Kiva said that a nega could only be mitzaref. So if you have one gris and it's a mixture of these two colors, it can only be mitzaref if it's only one level above, right? So the way Rabbi Kiva learns, imkein tiharta sid heichel militzaref. Sid heichel could not be mitzaref with anything. Sid heichel would not be able to be mitzaref anything. Give me 5 minutes. Sid heichel will not be able to mitzaref anything. Why? I'm sorry? Which is number 4. Why? Because Bahadiman Litrafi. Who are you going to combine it with? Litrafi Bahad Baheres? You can't compare it to Baheres because no, Sidechel is number 3.
Oh,
Krumbey is number 4. Sidechel is number 3. So Bahadiman Litrafi. Litrafi Bahad Baheres? You can't compare it to Baheres because it's too below. You can say Stadivim in it. You can say Litrafi Bahad Baheres. You can't. Lav told the Deyu. Our Mishnah clearly says, the Mishnah clearly says, the Av and the Tolda are a group. What do you mean they're a group? They're a group because they would combine. So you can't have a Tolda of Beheres combined with Seis. Bishlam, according to Rabbi Kiva, that doesn't group them at all. He just says, yeah, there's no groups, it's all one big happy family. But if you say Shtaim, Shein, Arba, and you're making groups, so you can't group Sidar Heichel with number 2, with Seis, because it's not in the same group. And you can't do it with Beheres, which is its Av, because it's 2 away.
1 and 3 are really one group.
Correct. 1 and 3 is one group, and 2 and 4. So therefore, it can't be that our Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Kiva. Freit Gemara, why are you asking me a kasha from Sid Heichel? Don't you have the same problem with Krumbeya? Right? Krumbeya is also 2 removed. It's 2 removed from Seis. So you'd have the same problem. Yachi Krumbeya Nami, Badiman Litrafu. Litrafu Bada says, Ika Sida Dif Mine. And Litrafu Bada Sid, La Barmineu. So you're asking me this big kasha from Sida Hechel. Why did you ask me the same kasha from Krumbeya? Zok Gemara, I'll tell you one. Hi, my Bishlama Beloy Sid Hechel. Let's say the Sid Hechel wouldn't have been an issue. Okay? Krumbeya Loy kasha. Krumbeya wouldn't have been fair. You know why? Because we have a special pasuk. Dafal Gab de Krum Beitza Mitasoi de Seis, even though Krumbeya is in the category of Seis, right? Nevertheless, Rachmana Omar Vila Seis Vila Sapachas. Now, Sapachas isn't one of the two main categories. But the Torah is saying Vila Seis Vila Sapachas. The Torah is saying that Seis you could be a little bit more liberal with. But here you got to be strict, only its kind. But Seis, you see, Seis or Sapachas, the Torah is more inclusive by what could be mitzar with Seis. Sapachas, Fela Seis, Aval Gab de Minchasa Minei Tuva, even though it's more levels away, you could still combine it. So therefore, you would say, since it says by Seis Ul Sapachas, the Torah is giving a special license that you could combine even things that are more madregas away. So therefore, for Seis, to that Rabbi Akiva, you could have attached. The that Rabbi Akiva says you have to be only one level above. That's only the Gabi Baharis. But the Gabi Seis, even Krumbeya, which is 2 levels away, will still be able to connect because of the Torah's inclusive language of L'seis, L'sapachas. But a L'sed Heichel Kasha, you cannot say that applies to Baharis. So if you can't say that applies to Baharis, then we have a question, is that you cannot combine Siddur Heichel with Seis because it's not the right Tolda. And you can't connect it with Baharis according to Rabbi Akiva because it's 2 away. Therefore, we're forced to say that our Mishnah is not consistent with Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so we'll stop here. Shkoyach.